Hello friends, it's good to be with you as always. I hope this finds you well. Today I want to talk again about prayer. Pastor Cheryl Matheson preached about it this past weekend. We'll link to that sermon here. Also, Pastor Valerie just came back from an annual prayer retreat. This year it was virtual, but it included some worship at St. John's Abbey, where she typically would go. It included some other worship or opportunity for prayer in the sanctuary. Pastor Mark Schmidt is going on one of the 2 annual fishing retreats, which always includes worship and prayer. This podcast, actually, as I've looked back over the last few months, about 10% or so of our episodes have actually been on prayer practices. And so we will link to a playlist of those prayer practices, and no doubt we'll be talking about other ones in the future. I also want to let you know that if you have prayer requests, you can always certainly email any of the pastors, but we just set up an email alias, prayers@spdlc.org. So please feel free to send an email, confidential prayer request to that. And as you know, I hope we've been inviting people into the sanctuary on Wednesdays for a personal time of reflection and prayer, and that is ongoing. So please join us for that. Starting on August 1st, which is Saturday, a few days after this episode will air, Pastor Matheson will start a 31-day prayer retreat. And there's a whole packet about that on our website. You can find it on the homepage or at spdlc.org/31-day. And we'll provide a link to that below. So it just feels like there's a lot going around with prayer right now, which is appropriate. We all need it. And so what I wanted to do today is, rather than talk about a prayer practice, I just wanted to lift up a few books about prayer that may or may not be interesting to you. I sort of scanned the shelves of my office this morning and pulled a few off that I thought might be interesting. I'll start actually with one which is connected to the retreat that Valerie just did, because, again, that retreat is often at St. John's University, St. John's Abbey, which is a Benedictine abbey. It's the largest Benedictine abbey in the United States. And so this one is a little book called Seeking God, The Way of Saint Benedict. And short chapters that talk about the Benedictine spirituality. That's one possibility. A few others here. This one is by a well-known Christian author named Philip Yancey. Yancey was actually our faith and life speaker many years ago when this book came out, and so he spoke about it. Interesting story about this book. He mentioned in that talk, the subtitle, if you can see it, is, or the title of the book is Prayer, Does It Make Any Difference? ? In England, I think the title was originally going to be Prayer, What Difference Does It Make? And they thought that was kind of too snarky, so they changed it to that. Anyway, this is a lovely book about prayer by a well-known Christian author. Here is a book called Watch and Pray, Christian Teachings on the Practice of Prayer. So this gives you sort of a wider range of thoughts from Christians over the centuries, as does a little book by Eugene Peterson. You may know Eugene Peterson as the translator of a translation of the Bible called The Message. And anyway, this one's called Praying with the Early Christians, a year of daily prayers and reflections on the words of the early Christians. So again, it gets us into community with those who have gone before us in the faith and how they thought about prayer, and maybe ways we can learn about prayer through them. 3 other quick books I will conclude with. 2 of them are very small. These are thin little volumes, but they're by really important Christians from the 20th century. From our own Lutheran tradition, one is by Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was, of course, a martyr to the faith during World War II in Nazi Germany. This one is called Prayers, or Psalms, the prayer book of the Bible. So it's walking us through the Psalms through the lens of prayer, again by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Thomas Merton has another similar small book. Thomas Merton was a very famous person in the middle of the 20th century, an American who began as a layperson and ended up becoming a Trappist monk, very famously. And this little volume is called Praying the Psalms. So those two, by Bonhoeffer and Merton, both use the Psalms as a basis for prayer. The final book I will lift up, maybe not surprisingly, is by C.S. Lewis. This was actually published after his death. Like the Screwtape Letters, it is based on letters that Lewis wrote. The confusing thing about this one, the title is called Letters to Malcolm, Chiefly on Prayer. The confusing thing is he does such a good job with it, we come to believe that he's actually writing these to a person named Malcolm. Malcolm didn't exist. It was a fictitious person he made up. Lewis, had tried to write a few volumes about prayer and discovered he struggled with it, and he decided in the end that it was easiest to write his thoughts about prayer in the form of a conversation with someone else. And so one of the nice things about this book is it's not an expert on prayer saying this is what you should do, but rather it's sort of a fellow journeyer, a fellow Christian on the path, raising questions about prayer. What does it mean? How does it work? This one is so important, actually. I'm going to try at least to link to a study guide from the C.S. Lewis study program, or I guess it's from the C.S. Lewis Institute. There's a little study guide that's a nice overview of the book. It sort of summarizes each of the chapters and gives you some further thoughts. Let me close with this. On her prayer retreat, Pastor Valerie had all kinds of resources for the retreatants having to do with wilderness this year. One of the prayers they used was a prayer called the Breastplate of St. Patrick, or the Lorica, it's sometimes called. The Lorica means a prayer of protection. It's a long prayer. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to read the last couple of stanzas of it as a concluding prayer for us today. Again, this is a prayer to protect us, to surround us with the presence of Christ. So pray with me, if you will. Christ be with me, Christ within me, Christ behind me, Christ before me, Christ beside me, Christ to win me, Christ to comfort and restore me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ in quiet, Christ in danger, Christ in hearts of all that love me, Christ in mouth of friend and stranger. Friends, I hope you will find these resources helpful. I'm grateful that you spent a little time with me today, and as always, I hope this finds you well. I invite you to stay in touch, and God bless you.